mindless march and the undead hordes. Zombies as mirrors of societal conformity. In the dimly lit cinema of our cultural consciousness, zombie movies have shuffled forward as one of the most pervasive genres, capturing audiences with their thrilling portrayal of apocalyptic chaos. Beyond the blood and gore, however, the popularity of zombie fiction often reflects a more profound commentary on societal dynamics. Basically, the concept of the zombie can be seen as an analogy for the ease with which individuals can be manipulated by public opinion and advertising, underscoring the allegory of mindless conformity amid the masses. You know, one of the things that I've noticed when I shop for people, I get these notifications, and when I arrive at the shop, I find that people are buying the exact same things. One of the first thing that comes to mind is some type of wine that somebody wanted. It was a rosé of some kind, and it was a specific brand. And when I asked around for the store associates to help me to find it because I wasn't able to locate it, they told me, oh, that's a popular brand, you know, everybody's buying that, it's probably not there. And of course, we checked where it would be, looked at the label, looked at the price, and it was gone. And I remember also hearing before that there was a similar situation at another shop. I think it was the same business, but a different location. And, you know, that vendor that I go to, I remember someone saying to me, oh yeah, that flies off the shelves very quickly because it was on TikTok. Yeah, I specifically remember now, one of the associates at that particular vendor said that the product was flying off the shelves because of TikTok. And that's interesting in itself, right? We know, if you're in marketing or if you have a business, some people may know that it's a great place to push products. People buy a lot of things from there. And in the past couple days, simply because I have been getting more information coming across my feeds talking about the possible ban that TikTok will have in the United States. And so I've been looking at it more and posting some videos and things as I'm doing some experiments. And I recently created this press release about the imminent ban of TikTok, and have seen a lot of people on there giving some really pretty interesting, what seems like viable advice and tips on selling through TikTok and using different free tools and things like that. And it's really, really great. And, you know, that's not the bad part of it. It's simply that most people will go ahead and buy things without even giving it a second thought, simply because it's come across their feed. Zombies, as traditionally depicted, are devoid of independent thought, driven by nothing more than their instinctual desires, such as the drive to feast on human flesh or brains. This singular focus is eerily reminiscent of how individuals, caught up in the omnipresent tide of advertising and viral trends, can seemingly lose their ability to think critically. Advertising, with its sophisticated psychological strategies, crafts narratives that appeal to our deepest desires and fears, often bypassing rational thought to encourage consumption and brand loyalty. Like zombies, individuals may end up shuffling through stores, driven by an insatiable quest to acquire the next big product. Another thing that comes to my mind after reading that paragraph is something that I found very interesting. One day I was at this popular cafe, and I'd become quite fond of one of the associates there, who seemed to, well, of course, she's really good looking, but she also is very friendly towards me more than everybody else has been there, and also seems to have a good head on her shoulders, always is working hard and things like that. But I remember when I got to the point where I was exchanging my phone number with her, and I happened to have two devices from the two major competing entities. I have the iOS system on an iPhone, and I have an Android. And I got the iPhone simply because I wanted to get an iPhone because I have never used one before. And so I wanted to see what all the hype was about. So there's this company that was giving out free phones. Well, it wasn't free. You get it and then you pay for it along with your monthly bill. And so I went ahead and got that. And so back to this cafe associate, when I was exchanging contact information, I asked her if she had an iPhone or an Android. And I specifically remember asking about that because there were these videos I had seen on another social media channel, probably Facebook or Instagram, but I saw where these women, it was specifically some posts about and videos about dating, and these women were on there making fun of people because they didn't have an iPhone. And they were saying, wow, they were giving all of these, as the colloquialisms go, the ick vibes. They were getting ick vibes and saying, oh my God, you don't have an iPhone? Are you poor? Or just all of these insults because the person didn't have an iPhone. But that didn't concern me at all when I was getting the information from this individual. To me, it was a joke. And so I said it that way, humorously, in my very dry and questionable style. I said, do you have an iPhone? Because I know how some people are very particular about whether somebody has an iPhone or not. I didn't go into that whole story about me seeing that stuff about the iPhone, nor, am I trying to date this person? But I just thought I would check. I thought it was interesting because I wanted to find out if she would say anything about whether I had an iPhone or not. And it kind of also gave me another clue into her character. She really genuinely seemed to not really care. And that's what she said. Oh, I don't care. It doesn't matter. So, but interestingly enough, I don't think I haven't met very many people who it matters to, but I think I might have heard here and there a few times, especially if I've been doing security, working the front door at a nightclub or something like that. I may have heard some sentiments like that. But I think it's pretty hilarious that those kind of things with the iPhones, the last part of that paragraph was, that people are driven by an insatiable quest to acquire the next big product. Everybody is really just kind of scrambling to get the next iPhone. The contagious spread of the zombie plague mirrors the rapid dissemination of ideas in a hyper-connected world. Social media platforms utilize algorithms that prioritize engagement over enlightenment, glamorizing echo chambers that amplify prevailing public opinions rather than diverse perspectives. Here, viral trends are akin or akin to infection, spreading across populations with little resistance from the individual minds that unquestioningly accept them. This is particularly evident in the way misinformation can breed and proliferate, turning otherwise thoughtful citizens into vessels that propagate unfounded beliefs. Recently, there's been a lot of chatter on the internet about Mark Zuckerberg changing or about to change his guidelines or the rules for how information is posted on Facebook. And people are saying, I saw one meme and it was an image, and it was this woman, a very overweight woman who looked very disheveled and looked just pretty crazy. Of course, that's the intention, to exaggerate everything like that. But she was typing away at a keyboard, and the captions in the meme were something like, our new fact checkers, right? And the interesting thing about that is, unfortunately, most people are terribly uninformed, misinformed, and uneducated, and do very little research of their own beyond the proper checking through the internet. I mean, it's interesting because of the things that I see people saying. They have no discernment between what the things that are posted online and the things that they read. And these are the people who have the most violent opinions, the people that get angry, those so-called keyboard warriors. I think that name is because people act so tough and say so many things online that they probably wouldn't say to most people's faces. And I find that interesting as a person who's been practicing martial arts and self-defense for over 30 years, and am still very, very fit and very active and train every single day. And the difference between that kind of keyboardization, I was thinking vocalization, right? But that kind of expression, and how the point being that people get so violent online, and a lot of it is because their emotions are acting without the benefit of intellect and without any critical thinking of any kind, and they're just fighting about this stuff. And it's interesting that we're gonna have fact checking like that. I don't know what's actually going to happen, but what I do know is that it's actually not that difficult to educate yourself and inform yourself about some of the basic things. I mean, even if people were to pick up junior high school and high school textbooks that maybe you could find at secondhand stores that would teach basic math and physics and critical thinking and philosophy, things like that, and become informed, and even just write your own short essays about it to kind of demonstrate your understanding. I know it sounds like I'm selling work, right? But at the same time, it's true. But in this world, one of the things that can't be taken away from us is the enrichment of our minds. And that's just not happening. And I think that it's amusing how people are getting all bent out of shape, or continuing to, because it's not like it's a brand new thing, about the changes that Mark Zuckerberg claims that he's going to be making throughout Meta. It's going to be interesting, to say the least, to witness what happens with that. Historical and contemporary instances illustrate the consequences of this social mimicry. Consider the era of McCarthyism in the United States, where fear and paranoia accelerated a cultural conformity that led to widespread suspicion and unjust persecution. More recently, the bandwagon effect in political movements often sees individuals aligning with popular sentiment without fully understanding or scrutinizing the nuances of the issues at hand. Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. That really summarizes right there is, people align with popular sentiment without fully understanding or scrutinizing the nuances of the issues at hand. I know it can be a lot of work, and it can be time consuming, because I've looked at the ballots and the different initiatives, and there's a lot of reading to do to understand and look at some of the different details and the fine print that goes into these things. But I feel as if many of us are not even taking the time to glance over it. And so, it's not so bad that we get our news and information from our peers and from other people around us, but it's a good starting point from which to take the information and then go ahead and look at various different sources for where that information is coming from. And for some reason, the thing that's coming to my mind right now is mathematics and physics as some fundamental things, these foundations for how we can really start to think about the world around us. I know because I've for many years done a lot of writing in what are considered to be supernatural, paranormal, and metaphysical subjects, and have gotten really familiar with numerology and things like that, what they call divination tools like runes and tarot cards and things like that. And after a while, you start to see where a lot of that stuff actually comes from, and how the human mind actually creates a lot of our experiences. And there's so much evidence of that too. How somebody could hear one thing and it sounds completely different from what's actually being resonated. So, for example, one amusing and entertaining example of this are those videos out there. I forget what they're called, but you'll see how they'll take some celebrity, like recently I've seen Ariana Grande, I think that's her name, and she's talking and they're doing voiceover, that she's saying different things because it looks like her mouth could be saying those things, right? But even more so than that, I remember being in death metal bands years ago, and I would hear the lyrics of from these vocalists, but I would create my own lyrics that matched with it, and then when I looked at it later, a lot of it would be completely different than what was actually being vocalized. But it was great because I created these whole new books and of lyrics that were my own because of what it sounded like the vocalist was saying. And there's so many ways that this can be done, but the point is that a lot of times we can hear and see things that are actually different from what is actually coming from the source. Zombie fiction symbolizes this potential for societal manipulation, warning against the dangers of collective inertia. These stories often feature protagonists who resist becoming part of the undead horde, championing individualism and critical thinking as their weapons against conformity. They challenge audiences to question the status quo of the fictional universes, as well as their own susceptibility to external influences. Yeah, there's I can really only narcissistically, as some people will accuse, which is why I changed my artist stage name to MC Narcissist, M.C. Narcissist, because when I lived in China, this woman I met there constantly called me a narcissist over and over again, while calling me names, physically beating me up, and belittling me constantly every opportunity that I got to be, she got to be around me. And, of course I left that situation. It didn't take very long, but it was interesting that those kind of things that people will label. But my point is, and I'll just continue to say narcissistically from my own experience as an example, is years ago, many years ago, it must have been sometime around the end of junior high school when I moved from New York to Florida, where I stopped drinking those cartons of milk that they give in school, because although there are all the commercials that would say milk does the body good and strong bones and teeth and all other stuff like that, it just tasted and smelled disgusting to me. And those cartons, it just was grossed me out. And so no amount of everybody around me saying, oh, you got to drink your milk, would let me keep doing that. And it's possibly one of the reasons why I could say some of the conspiracy theorists will tell you that there's all these hormones and things in the milk, but why I have one brother, for example, who is 6 years younger than me. I'm 5'11". Let me not exaggerate. I'm 5'10", and he's 6'6", right? I have another younger brother who's 3 years younger than me, and he's about 6'1" or 6'2". And they're all bigger than me. They have much more heft to them as well, and I don't know if it's because I just eat a lot differently than most people do. And again, going back to when I was talking about earlier about going to these different vendors and shops, shopping for people, that I find it's so bizarre, and I get lost in the grocery stores and liquor stores and all this other stuff like that, because another thing that I stopped doing on my own is alcohol is not a thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Neither are cigarettes or marijuana or anything like that. It just, there's a saying that says, you cannot serve two masters, God and mammon. I can just make that analogy of black and white. I had to, follow the blackness of being healthy, the dark side of health. I have to be a supervillain and rebel against what most people are doing, because it just doesn't feel good. Just like a long time ago, I stopped drinking milk, and along with that, I stopped eating cereal out of the boxes, like all of those famous brands of Kellogg's and whoever makes Cheerios and all that other stuff like that. All those colorful boxes that you'll see that they're all these primary colors of red, green, and blue, and lots of yellows, and that neat packaging. Whenever I go to the stores and look at the shelves, it really kind of just trips me out. It's actually somewhat repulsive to me. It doesn't make me sick or anything like that. It just doesn't make any sense. And the things that I shop for people and the stuff that I see them eating, I'm in my head, my inner voice is asking myself the question: how can people possibly be eating this over and over again, and the stuff that they're feeding to their children? But that to me is like they talk about, as the plots of these movies, right? And as I wrote here about that, the stories feature protagonists who resist becoming part of the undead hordes, and that's what they talk about in these movies. Or I shouldn't say talk about, but depict. Would rather say. I think that's a little bit clearer way to say that, right? Is that it's individualism as against conformity. It reminds me of there's a band with the name Corrosion of Conformity. But it's not that all conformity is bad, right? Like, I think, for example, that a lot of and this is a bias of mine, but I think that the culture of training martial arts and mixed martial arts and going to the gym and working out and those kind of things, I think that kind of conformity is a more sensible one than conforming to a lot of the ideas that people get into that actually I've seen and I know causes problems with people's health, mentally, physically, and so many different ways. And a lot of that starts with critically thinking about the food that we eat and the kinds of activities that we engage in. But there's not enough of that critical thinking. As I sip, I poured that coffee a little bit earlier, probably heard it. I didn't drink any of it. It's really, really good. Like my soul, like my villainous rebellion, I take my coffee black. Navigating through this increasingly complex media landscape, the analogy of zombies reminds us to develop independence of thought. It encourages us to resist the metaphorical infection of mindless conformity by exercising skepticism and critical evaluation of the information and narratives that inundate us daily. Just as survivors in zombie fiction must barricade themselves against the undead, we too must construct defenses of discernment to preserve our intellectual autonomy. You know, one of the main inspirations for writing this essay was how when I'm out a lot and out about around a lot of people, I see a lot of beautiful human beings. And the biological part of me, the chemical, hormonal part of me, starts to begin to be drawn towards them. But then, very quickly, I hear them speaking, or I see what they've done to their hair, or their makeup, or their clothing, and I'm immediately repulsed, and I start thinking that I don't want to be infected by the zombie plague. I really it turns me off. It really put me in this state where I realize I'm in this narrative, and this could be, you can accuse me of being crazy, and many people will, just like, so many people will defend their enslavement in what could be analogous to what a lot of people say is just like the Matrix, right? But the narrative that I exist in is that I am living in a world that most of the people are zombies. And this is really underlying. I don't know. I'm pretty sure this is something that has been spoken about before, has been written about, has been talked about, but that the zombie culture, the whole zombie fiction, in a lot of ways are mirrors of what's going on in society. And for all intents and purposes, the activities, the being of the world, the way that it's going, has really fallen into the hands of the zombie hordes. A lot of people will complain about the terrible environment that we live in on Earth, and the war and the disease and the homelessness and all this and that. But that's the symptoms of living in a world that's been overrun by zombie hordes. Most people are infected by this zombie plague. It's one of the reasons why so many places are falling apart and why so many bad things are happening, because people really and truly are not thinking for themselves and not making intelligent decisions. They really are not. If people were, people would not be so sick and so fat and obese and dying of these diseases that are preventable. And I could even secondarily talk about things like cancer, because we as a whole society, all of us, we allow these manufacturers and companies to create these toxins in the environment that eventually lead to us getting cancers and different diseases like that we don't necessarily have to be having in as large amounts as we do. I mean, cancers have been happening for centuries, maybe even millennia, but you've also got to understand that for thousands of years, people have been melting and breathing in lead and all kinds of materials, just making stuff. And so it's not like it's a new thing. As long as human beings have been digging around in the ground and melting things and burning fires, you're going to have these things. But it's about time that maybe we start to think a little bit more deeply about what we're doing to ourselves in this world, and there's so much more to say about that. Zombie movies and fiction do more than entertain. They serve as a stark and dark mirror, reflecting our societal vulnerabilities. In recognizing the pervasive themes of manipulation and conformity embodied by the undead, we are reminded of the critical importance of maintaining our humanity through conscious awareness and thoughtful resistance against the alluring pull of the crowd. Through this lens, zombies challenge us to ask ourselves, are we really truly alive, or do we merely shuffle through life, driven by forces we do not understand? I'll ask again, are we truly alive, or do we merely shuffle through life, driven by forces we don't understand? Mindless March and the Undead Hordes, zombies as mirrors of societal conformity. I'm Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander, reading in association with World Reading Club, of course. This is sponsored by the Blog Dealer on blogdealer.com. There are also some links to some of those books that I talked about, some supernatural books. I have a book about demonology and exorcism in general, which is really a anthology of a bunch of other, I call them practice books, that I put out on Amazon. This one puts them all together in one. And then another one about exorcising demons in the, specifically it says in Virginia Beach's Hampton Roads, but I put that very specific. I did a couple of them that were specifically talked about being in Virginia, because that's where I spend most of my time. And those links are going to be in this posting. It'll be on eym.hypnoathletics.com. There's also a free ebook on that site about metaphysical hypnosis. But as soon as this recording goes live on Spreaker, all of the information will be there in the show notes, where you can get links to those books, and you can see the text of this that I read without my commentary in between.